Hey, välkommen. I need to work on my Swedish. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to D&D Optimized, part of the D4 network. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons and Dragons. We theorycraft about them, we crunch some numbers, not with the intent to tell you the right way or the best way or the only way to play a certain character, but to explore one possible way to play a particular character in hopes of creating something that's both really powerful but also really fun to play in-game. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, then welcome home. This is absolutely where you belong, and I am absolutely thrilled that you're here, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby, and I'll be your host. Just a reminder, if you would like a written step-by-step guide to recreate this character and other character builds that I do, please consider, if you would, joining the channel as a member. There should be a little button down there somewhere. If you're on a big computer, it seems to not work as well on mobile for whatever reason. For $2 a month, you can get access to my library of write-ups so that you can kind of use a cheat sheet to recreate the character yourself in-game if you would like. More importantly, I think, for most of my supporters anyway, it's just a way to support the channel additionally and help me create more and better content. So thanks for considering. Thanks to my members, and even if you can't or have no desire to join the channel as a member, thanks for being here anyway. Just watching and liking and subscribing and commenting are all also great ways to support the channel, so thanks. All right, let's jump in. Almost since I started this YouTube channel, I have been getting requests to build what a lot of you call the ultimate re-roller. The concept for the character is someone who is either inexplicably and insanely lucky and or who perhaps also has the ability to predict the future and or grab the knob of fate and just twist it once in a while to favor them and their allies at the expense of their enemies. Now, there are a lot of abilities in D&D that let you re-roll the dice when something goes differently than the way you want it to. Spells, class and subclass abilities, feats, racial features, and wouldn't it be awesome if we could find a way to combine a lot of them? I don't think it's possible really to combine all of them, but a lot of them in a way that's fun, useful, and powerful. Yeah, I think it would be awesome. So let's do it. But here's the thing for me. When I build a character, I tend to build one that is, well, sufficient unto itself. Even though I know that D&D is a game that's meant to be played with friends, and the most effective parties are the ones who complement each other well and synergize well, both with their roleplay but also with their mechanics, it's impossible for me to know exactly who you are going to be playing with and what abilities they may or may not have. Now, this re-roller character is one that I envision being primarily a support character. They are here to make sure that their friends can turn failure into success and that their enemies can turn success into failure. So they're really primarily someone who just makes their teammates better and combat go a lot more smoothly and successfully for their party, even though they themselves might not necessarily be doing a lot of damage, right? But still, I don't know exactly how powerful your party is going to be. I'm not sure what spells they might have that you'll be helping them out with, or what attacks they'll be making that you will help ensure find their target. And so I really want to make sure that I have something that is really potent and powerful to do as well. So regardless of what attacks and spells and abilities my teammates may have, I know that I can make fantastic use of all the ways that I can twist fate to favor myself and my friends. So for me, for this character, what I want to do, I think, is try and find a really powerful and crippling status effect that I can impose on my enemies to ensure that I am making a really valuable contribution to combat in addition to just sort of buffing and debuffing. And so, what are the most potent and crippling statuses that you can inflict on an enemy in-game? Aside from death, I suppose. The dead status. That's a pretty powerful one to inflict on your enemies. But maybe other than that. For me, there are two clear frontrunners. In first place, in my opinion, is Paralyzed. Paralyzed is amazing. It's one that I really tried to get the most out of with my Critlander build there if you haven't seen that. The problem with Paralyzed, though, I think, is that it's not really easy to inflict on your enemies. The best ways to do it typically involve spells, and if they're not a humanoid, which we don't typically see a lot of in most combat encounters, in most campaigns, especially as we get higher and higher level, right? Then most spells that inflict the paralyzed condition are fairly high level. Hold Monster is, I think, the earliest that we could get access to it kind of consistently, and that's a 5th level spell that we typically are only going to be able to cast once, maybe twice per day after we get 9 levels into a full spellcaster, right? I'm not sure that Paralyze is really the condition that we should be gunning for here as the thing that we want to try and inflict on our enemies. For me, the second most crippling condition that we can inflict on an enemy, next to the dead condition, is the stunned condition. Now, stunned is almost as good as paralyzed. With both paralyzed and stunned, the victim is incapacitated, meaning they can't take actions or reactions, they can't move, they automatically fail strength and dexterity saves, and attack rolls against the victim are made with advantage. Really, really strong. The only additional benefit that we get from paralyzed really is that all ally attacks against the paralyzed enemy, if they're made within 5 feet, are automatic criticals. And that's great, but again, not something that's easy to inflict on an enemy with a lot of consistency and regularity. Stunned, on the other hand, is a little easier to come by, thanks to, you guessed it, the Monk's Stunning Strike feature. And Stunning Strike is perhaps simultaneously the best and worst thing about monks. As most of you know, monks are my favorite class in D&D, but I also often complain about how they're kind of underpowered. There is, though, a fairly sizable group of people in the D&D community who think that monks are either just fine or are maybe even on the overpowered side. I know that's going to come as a shock to some of you, but it's true. And frankly, I suspect that most people at Wizards of the Coast themselves tend to fall into that latter category based on the majority of the monk subclasses we've been getting lately and the lack of significant reworking that we've seen for the monk class, with maybe Mercy Monk being the exception that proves the rule. But if I had to guess, I would guess that the reason those people tend to think that monks are just fine or are maybe even a little overpowered is because they have Stunning Strike. And Stunning Strike, many would argue, is incredibly amazing, right? I mean, it lets you completely shut down potentially multiple enemies in a turn with a very crippling stunned condition. And you can even, theoretically, keep an enemy or even enemies stun locked round after round so that they never get a chance to do anything before they die. The problem with Stunning Strike, of course, is that in addition to the fact that it uses the same resource that basically everything a monk can do uses, namely ki, is that it famously requires that the enemy fail a Constitution saving throw in order for it to work. And the vast majority of dangerous enemies who you would really want to inflict with the stunned condition in D&D have really great bonuses to their Constitution saving throws. Thus, for most of the deadliest enemies that a monk will fight, Stunning Strike just doesn't really work that well most of the time, and you're spending your valuable resources in order to find that out the hard way. And when the arguably most powerful feature of a class tends to not work most of the time that you really want it to work, the class is going to feel underwhelming. But, what if we could build a character who had a lot of fantastic ways to greatly increase the likelihood of something like Stunning Strike actually sticking? What if we had a character who could twist the knob of fate when they needed it most, and who could then better control their own destiny and be less subject to the whims of the dice and the enemy saving throw bonuses? Now, that would be a way to really take advantage of an otherwise amazing and powerful ability to stun your enemy, keeping them from doing anything while your friends just piled on the pain, reducing them to smithereens without the enemy being able to even retaliate in any way. Even if you yourself didn't really bring a lot of damage to the fight, if you could reliably and consistently lock down even the toughest enemies, while also occasionally buffing your friends and helping make sure that their attacks land more consistently and that their saving throws are successful more often, wouldn't that be both an incredibly fun and also powerful character in D&D? I submit that it would. And thus, I proudly present episode 77, The Fate Weaver. Before we jump into the build, of course, as always, please check out this fantastic artwork by my friend Randall Hampton, who creates wonderful pieces for the character concepts that I come up with each week, and this, as always, is no exception. I love the detail that he puts into it. I love the visual effects that we get with this character that just really speak to the way that I had envisioned them. So thanks as always, Randall. If you're interested in checking out Randall or following him, I will put links in the video description as always for how to do so. All right, let's jump into the build. At level 1, I can see this character starting one of two ways. So you're going to need to answer for yourself the following question. Are you primarily wanting to play this character for Stunning Strike, or to be primarily a re-rolling, fate-twisting support type character? Personally, I envision this character, like I've said, to be primarily a support type character, so I am going to want to start off as, any guesses? A bard. But again, if you would rather beeline for Stunning Strike and then try and add ways to make it stick more reliably, I think starting Monk here is perfectly viable. But for us, yes, we're going to start Bard. Our primary goal will be to help our friends, deter our enemies, and let's be honest, no one does those things better than a bard, right? Now, rather than come up with a story reason for this character for all of the multiclassing that they're going to be doing, I want to instead do what I sometimes will and just say that I envision this character to sort of be like their own custom class. They're not a Bard X, Monk Y, third class Z, but are instead the Oracle class, or the Mystic class, or a Muse, or a Prophet. They are a character built to support their allies by plucking on the strings of fate and time, and just so happen, for mechanics reasons, to take a few levels in a few official classes in order to get there. As for our race, of course, I think the ultimate re-roller has to go halfling, right? There's just no other option, in my opinion, for this character concept. And if I'm not mistaken, this might be the first time that I've ever actually just straight up recommended halfling as our starting race. Not counting the few times that I've maybe mentioned it as a potential alternative to what's usually custom lineage. So that's exciting and a little sad that it took me this long. We finally get to play a hobbit. Now, the main reason that we're going halfling, of course, is because of the halfling luck feature that they get, which tells us that anytime we roll a 1 on the d20 for an attack roll, an ability score, or a saving throw, we can re-roll it and must use the new roll. That's really awesome. It means that critical fails will almost never happen to this character. But then as for the halfling subrace that I would recommend, don't know that there are any particularly imperative for this build. If you can use the Eberron book, I would probably go with Mark of Healing or maybe Mark of Hospitality, because both are going to give you additional spells, many of which as a support character you're probably going to want anyways. Otherwise, I would probably go with the Lotus Den halfling, again for the additional spells, though there are fewer of them and maybe not as potent in my opinion, plus I like nature. But anyway, pick the one that you think best fits for your character. So yeah, you're like this adorable little halfling, but you're kind of like the halfling oracle, the halfling prophet. And I'm not really sure if I would play this character as like this sagacious, wise halfling, a character who takes themselves very seriously and who goes into a trance with their eyes going white as they foretell and or alter the timeline, or if I would play them more as sort of a silly accidental prophet who maybe doesn't even really know that they're having visions and or telling the future, akin to a bumbling Professor Trelawney type. Maybe they do take themselves very seriously, but everyone thinks that they're kind of just a fraud, but then sometimes they actually have a real trance or foretelling. I would be curious to know how you think you would play this character from a game and roleplay and story perspective. As for our ability scores, this is the most painful part of the build for me, and it's perhaps the maddest character I've ever built, the most multiple ability score dependent. And to do everything that I want to do with them, we actually have to make Constitution a dump stat, which I know is absurd and insane. And so, I'm going to talk throughout the build about alternative paths you could take to maybe help yourself be a little less mad, cut out this option and instead just go with these two kind of thing. If that's a major concern for you, But anyway, assuming the point buy method as always, I'm going to recommend that we start with a 14 wisdom plus 2, a 15 charisma and our plus 1 there, so we'd have 16 in both, a 13 intelligence, and a 13 dexterity. So bear with me as we go through, keep an open mind. I think we could make this work as is, but anyway, we'll talk about it as we go. But yes, this character is going to be very squishy. Now, fortunately, we won't plan on being in melee range of our enemies ever, really, if we can avoid it. And we will have a lot of ways to try and twist fate in our favor, but I do really hope that you have a party that can make themselves more attractive targets for your enemies. So let's just go into this with our eyes wide open here. As for our equipment, I'm going to recommend that you go with the gold buy method and that you take some studded leather and like an instrument, of course, as a bard, and your other necessities. Take a weapon if you want, but I'm not going to plan on making weapon attacks with this character. I would use cantrips, I think, for my actions, at least early on, if I wasn't casting a spell-slotted spell. And then as a bard, at level 1, we get Bardic Inspiration, of course. That lets us, as a bonus action, charisma modifier times per day, so 3 for us right now, inspire our allies, letting them add our Bardic Inspiration die, which is currently a d6. It does scale with more bard levels. They can add that to any ability check, attack roll, or saving throw that they make within the next 10 minutes. I think of this as sort of like our first way to alter fate, potentially turning what otherwise would be an ally's failure into success. And then, yes, we do get spells as a bard at level 1. We get cantrips and first level spells, of course. And I mean, you are a bard, so I kind of think you have to take Vicious Mockery, do you not? And maybe Prestidigitation is a popular one, but anyway, pick your favorites. Vicious Mockery, though, I think is particularly great as a support character who's not necessarily going to plan on doing a ton of damage, since you can use it to do a little bit of damage and then also impose disadvantage on an enemy attack, which is a nice way to support your allies and again try to sort of twist fate to your party members' advantage, right? As for first level spells, there are plenty of great ones, of course. I would say to make sure that you at least get Healing Word if you didn't get it as a mark of healing halfling, but I do want to highlight 2 spells in particular that I think are really important for this build. First, Bane. Bane, I think, might be the go-to concentration spell throughout this character's career, actually. It's sort of the anti-bless, right? Now, many would argue that bless is the better spell, since there's no chance of it failing. Among other things, you cast it on your allies. And that's a pretty good point, but bards don't typically get access to the bless spell, so I think it's kind of a moot point. But also, for this character and our stated goals, I think Bane is perfect. As an action, and with concentration, you choose up to 3 enemies within 30 feet and force all of them to make a charisma saving throw, probably the lowest save for enemies in D&D on average, so that's fabulous. And if they fail, for the next minute, they will have to subtract a d4 from any attack or saving throw that they make. And if you upcast it, you can target additional creatures. So this is like the first way that we get to lower enemy saving throws, but it won't be the last. Lowering their attacks is also really strong, especially if you've inflicted them with disadvantage via Vicious Mockery, right? Who needs a tank? These enemies can't hit anything. Except you, probably. They could still probably hit you. Stay behind the paladin. The other spell I consider a must-have for this build is, of course, Silvery Barbs. I hope that by now most of the mob violence around this spell has died down. But I guess I'll just say this for those who still think that it's a broken and/or overpowered spell. I don't think it is. I think it's very strong. In some situations, it's the best use of both our spell slot and our reaction. In many, many other situations, we'll still be better off using our reaction and/or spell slot for other things. I won't go into it any more than that. But if you would like a more thorough and well-reasoned discourse on the subject, look no further than this video here from my friend Chris over at Treant Monk's Temple. I basically agree with everything that he says there. Anyway, if you play at a table where Silvery Barbs is banned for some reason, I don't think that it ruins this character by any means, but it is a nice arrow to have in our fate-twisting quiver. In case you don't know, you cast the spell as a reaction when an enemy within 60 feet succeeds on an ability, an attack, or a saving throw, forcing them to roll another d20 and then use the lower roll. You then choose an ally, or yourself even, to have advantage on the next attack, ability check, or or saving throw that you or they make in the next minute. Okay, so right at level 1, we now already have multiple ways to grant disadvantage to enemy attacks and saving throws, and we're also lowering the actual rolled number the enemies make via Bane, and granting advantage to allies via Silvery Barbs, and increasing the rolled number that an ally can make via Bardic Inspiration. This feels pretty good. We are off to a great start with our Fate Weaver character concept. At level 2, as a bard, we get Song of Rest, which tells us that when our allies are taking a short rest and spending hit dice to recover hit points, they can add an additional d6 to the hit points that they recover because you are playing soothing music or perhaps telling a great story. I kind of envisioned this character, I think, as more of a storyteller than a musician necessarily. And then we also get one of my very favorite bard abilities, Jack of All Trades. It just lets you add half of your proficiency bonus, rounded down, to any ability check you make that doesn't already include your proficiency bonus. Makes you a fantastic, out-of-combat utility expert, especially. At level 3, we get, first up, second level bard spells, and I would say pick your favorites. There are plenty of fun and powerful options here, but the strongest ones, Heat Metal, Hold Person, Suggestion, all require your concentration. So if you want to use them in combat instead of Bane, go for it. I think I'm probably going to stick with Bane on this character, but yeah, have fun with it. And then we also get Expertise, which lets us pick 2 of our skills that we're proficient in and double our proficiency bonus for them. So, I feel like you have to go with Performance at least, right? Since you're a bard. But I guess if you want to be boring and take Perception and Stealth or Acrobatics or something, you could. And then at level 3, as a bard, we get our subclass, our Bardic College. And we are going to go with, as I'm sure many of you predicted, the College of Eloquence. So yes, you are the true master of oration, storytelling, soothsaying. And as an eloquence bard, which I love, we get a couple of great features at level 3. So we first up get Silver Tongue, which tells us that any deception or persuasion check that you make where you roll lower than a 10, you now just count that roll as a 10. You are already a pretty good party face. Now you are an amazing one. So assuming that you're proficient in both deception and persuasion, you can't get lower than a 15 on those now. And if you took expertise in them, But the main reason that we are here as an eloquence bard, of course, is for the Unsettling Words feature. With Unsettling Words, as a bonus action, you can now spend a use of your Bardic Inspiration to cause a creature to subtract the number you roll on your Bardic Inspiration die from the next saving throw that they make before the start of your next turn. So if you know that they're going to be making a saving throw sometime in the next round, it's a fantastically powerful ability. And now, if they're under the effects of the Bane spell, you could be reducing an enemy's save by a d4 and a d6 for a total reduction of 6 on average. And thanks to Silvery Barbs, you could even potentially force them to re-roll that save even on the off chance that they succeed. Now, I wouldn't suggest spending all of those resources for an enemy that's trying to make a save against, like, Toll the Dead or something, but for a really important ability or save and against a really important enemy, it will be very, very strong. At level 4, I think that I'm going to have our Guru Fate Twister character start taking monk levels now. Again, you might not want to go this route at all, and I think that would be totally fine. You might feel that 5 levels into monk here is just too big a price to pay for Stunning Strike. Or maybe you don't like monks. I can't imagine who would not like monks. Offense taken. Or, maybe you have some other party members with really strong save-based spells or abilities. Maybe there's already a monk in the party. If any of the above is true, and or you just want to focus on being the ultimate re-roller, then I would say skip these monk levels and enjoy being less multiple ability score dependent. For me, I both love monks and really want a reliable and powerful ability to take advantage of all of this debuffing that we're doing. So I'm going to take some monk levels here. As a monk, at level 1, we get Unarmored Defense. This tells us that so long as we're not wearing armor or using a shield, our AC equals our Dexterity modifier plus our Wisdom modifier. So that would put us at a 14 right now if we took off that studded leather that we'd been wearing. It's not great, but might as well go naked. And then we also get the martial arts feature that basically is going to improve our unarmed strike and monk weapon attacks, letting us make an unarmed strike as a bonus action if we're unarmored and only using monk weapons. I'm not going to go into that or even worry about it for now. Like I said before, I'm planning on using spells for my action right now, even if it's just Vicious Mockery every turn. We're not here for big damage numbers, we're here for support, right? At level 5, we would be a monk 2, and we get unarmored movement, which gives us an extra 10 feet of move speed if we are unarmored or not using a shield. That's really nice, especially for our short little hobbit legs as we are trying to stay out of reach of the bad guys. And then we also get that most controversial of monk features, Ki. Now, ki points are used to basically fuel everything that a monk does. We get 1 ki point per monk level, arguably too few, but they do reset on a short rest, so that's nice. For now, we can use these ki points for Flurry of Blows, giving us now 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action instead of just 1 that we got from martial arts if we take the attack action, which we aren't doing currently. We could also do Patient Defense, which lets us spend a ki point to take the dodge action as a bonus action instead of as an action. And then we also get Step of the Wind, letting us dash or disengage for a ki point and our bonus action, again, instead of our action. Kind of hurts that we have to spend a ki point for a worse version of something that rogues just get for free at level 2, but whatever. You know, we don't have a lot of other uses for our ki at the moment, so you might as well spend a ki point probably for a Patient Defense more often than anything, I think, right now, which will be nice to kind of help increase our survivability, as long as you're not using your bonus action for something else like a healing word or using your bardic inspiration, right? And then at level 6, we would be a monk 3. This is where things start to change a little bit tactically for our character. So we get Deflect Missiles, first of all, which lets us use our reaction to reduce the damage that we take when we're hit by a ranged weapon attack. Doing so would reduce the damage by 1d10 plus our dex modifier plus our monk level. So that would be for us 9.5 damage on average when we used it. That's actually pretty decent. And honestly, considering that we're going to be trying our best to stay out of melee range of our enemies, this might come in handy more often than it would for other characters, I think, as those ranged characters potentially really try and hit us, since the melee ones hopefully can't get to us very easily. I am a little loath to give up our reaction for it, but use it if you need it. Additionally, too, you can spend a ki point to redirect that missile at an attacker if you reduce the damage to 0, which is super cool visually, but not really a great use of our ki points, in my opinion, especially with our pretty lowly dexterity score. Use it in extreme circumstances, I guess. But then at monk 3, we do get our monk subclass, our monastic tradition. And I want to go with the way of the astral self. I think it's the best fit for us both thematically and mechanically. So let's read what Wizards of the Coast has written about the Way of the Astral Self monk. A monk who follows the Way of the Astral Self believes their body is an illusion. They see their ki as a representation of their true form, an astral self. This astral self has the capacity to be a force of order or disorder, with some monasteries training students to use their power to protect the weak, and others instructing aspirants in how to manifest their true selves in service to the mighty. And yeah, honestly, for this kind of guru, oracle, fate weaver character we're building, I think astral self is a perfect fit. It's very new agey, right? But also, we are going to get some nice mechanical benefits from this subclass. So right away, we get the Arms of the Astral Self feature, which tells us that with a bonus action and a ki point, we can now summon the Arms of the Astral Self. When we do so, every creature within 10 feet of us must succeed on a dexterity saving throw, and the difficulty check is based on our wisdom score, or take force damage, equal to 2 rolls of our martial arts die. 2d4 damage. Ooh. Why does this cost a ki point, Wizards of the Coast? Why? It's not like we've got just ki points coming out of our ears. Just make it usable like proficiency bonus times per day or something if you need to put a limit on how often you can do this, right? Ugh. Anyway, for the next 10 minutes, you can use your wisdom modifier instead of your strength modifier for strength checks and saving throws, meaning that we could grapple with wisdom if we wanted to now. Also, you can use these arms to make unarmed strikes, and when you make an unarmed strike with the arms, we have an additional 5 feet of reach, and that's important. And the unarmed strikes we make are considered force damage, nice, and use our wisdom modifier instead of our dexterity modifier to hit and to damage. Okay, cool. Perfect. This is great for us. So at level 6, we typically do a damage report, right? I don't really do damage reports for my support focused builds, but I do want to pause for a moment and just do like a tactics report. What does combat look for us right now? So the way I envision combat going for us currently is something like this. Round 1, we cast Bane with our action. We run up to within 10 feet from as many enemies as possible, but not 5. We don't want to have to take opportunity attacks as we run away. And then summon our astral arms. Do a little damage to, a couple, 3 people or whatever that are nearby, and then run away. Saving our reaction, if possible, for silvery barbs when we need it, etc. On subsequent rounds, I think most of the time I'm probably running up to an enemy within just 10 feet away, right? And punching them with my wisdom arms, my wise guy arms. Oh, a wise guy, eh? Put 'em up, put 'em up. I'm probably saving my bonus action for Bardic Inspiration, whether that means regular Bardic Inspiration for an ally or the Unsettling Words Bardic Inspiration debuff for an enemy. Of course, we only have 3 Bardic Inspirations per long rest currently, so we're going to want to use those carefully. Healing Word, I think, would be reserved for when an ally goes unconscious, I think, for our bonus action. But otherwise, our bonus action will probably be spent on another unarmed strike, and maybe even 2 via Flurry of Blows for now. But again, after you make those attacks, you are running away. And this is why it's so important that we have reach with our Wise Guy arms. We do not want to be around when it's our melee enemy's turn. Now, we're not doing a ton of damage here, but, we're doing a little. We're peppering the enemies with some hit and run tactics. But again, still predominantly here to buff our friends and debuff our enemies. Capiche? For that reason, sure. Sometimes Vicious Mockery will be a perfectly valid use of our action still, I think. And so, keep your list of insults handy. We are here potentially doing a lot to make combat go much more smoothly for our entire party. We're inspiring our friends, we're de-spiring our enemies, uninspiring them, reducing enemy saves, reducing their hit chance, causing them to reroll successful saving throws or attacks. We are absolutely the most annoying little halfling on the battlefield for our enemies. So again, I hope you have a good chunky barbarian to hide behind or something. No shame. Discretion is the better part of valor and all of that. At level 7, we would be a monk 4. We get our first ability score increase or feat. There are so many feats and ability score increases that I want on this character. It kills me. I mean, bountiful luck, lucky, second chance, resilient constitution, and a higher charisma score are all competing for attention. But I think for me, for this version of the character, I'm probably going to want to prioritize wisdom here. Mostly for the stunning strike that we're about to get, but also for a little bump to our hit chance, damage, and also to our armor class. Of course, if you're skipping monk levels altogether, I'm probably either going to bump charisma here, I think, for a better bard spell DC and more uses of our inspiration, or lucky. You also, as a monk 4, get slow fall, which, as many of you know, is one of my favorite monk abilities that you probably just won't get to use that often. But when you do, so cool. You can use your reaction to reduce falling damage. Normally, it's a d6 per 10 feet that you fall. You reduce it by 5 times your monk level, or 20 damage currently, which means that you could currently fall for around 60 feet or so without taking much or even any damage on average. Neat. But then at level 8, we would be a monk 5, finally. And first up, our unarmed strike goes from a d4 to a d6, so that's a nice little damage bump. We do get extra attack, meaning that we get to attack twice on our turn when we take the attack action, of course, which is going to give us both a little more damage and, more importantly for us, more opportunities to land, yes, our stunning strike. So now, when we hit another creature with a melee weapon attack, and again, yes, unarmed strikes do qualify here for this purpose. Look it up if you have to. We can spend a key point to attempt a stunning strike. If the target fails a Constitution saving throw, they are stunned until the end of your next turn. The end. Meaning that potentially we could stun them again on our next turn and they could just remain stunned perpetually, right? This is what we call a stun lock. And it's awesome when it works. Fortunately for us, thanks to Bane, unsettling words, and silvery barbs, it should work most of the time if we have the resources for it. So yes, it goes without saying, I think, that we should be saving those bardic inspirations, especially for the big, like, beefcake enemies with this build. If we can stick our stunning strike on our most dangerous enemy with consistency, it's going to make combat so much better for our entire party and is 100% worth the resource expenditure, in my opinion. Oh, and again, just in case you weren't aware, the DC that the enemy is saving against for stunning strike is based on your wisdom modifier. So that, in addition to the extra reach that we get, was the main reason that I wanted to go with Astral Self for our monastic tradition. We're mad enough as it is. At least this way we can prioritize our wisdom and improve both our chance to hit as well as our chance to get stunning strike to stick. And then at level 9, I think the question becomes, where do we go from here? On the one hand, I really want more monk levels, primarily for more key points, so I can attempt to stun more often. On the other hand, I want more bard levels for more and better bardic inspirations primarily, but also I just don't think I could sleep at night if I claimed to be building a re-roller, fate twister, guru, prophet, oracle character and didn't take some wizard levels, right? So for me, for this character, that's the next stop in our progression. And again, I think for those who would just as soon skip the monk levels and focus even more on your fate twisting abilities, I would go wizard right after bard 3. But for us here at level 9, we're a wizard 1. We get spells, of course. I'm going to say pick your favorites, maybe with the exception of find familiar. You kind of got to have find familiar. That way you can give either yourself or an ally advantage on one attack consistently without having to spend additional resources for the benefit. Shield and absorb elements are, of course, great self-defense options, though they will place additional demand on our reaction, which we're going to have even more demands on here in a second. But anyway, worth taking, I think. Also, as a Wizard 1, we get Arcane Recovery, which lets us recover a spent spell slot equal to half our wizard levels rounded up once per day after a short rest. I'm really happy to have an additional first level spell slot, especially on this character. So at level 9 for our tactics report check-in, the big thing that's changed for us now since last time is that when we really need to, we can run in with those astral arms, make 2 attacks for quite a bit more damage thanks to our wisdom bump, extra attack, and unarmed strike damage increases. I mean, that's still not much to write home about, but it's been a nice increase. And then we would spend those key points and potentially additional resources, including our Bardic Inspiration and or Silvery Barbs, to make sure that our Stunning Strike really sticks. At level 10, we would be a Wizard 2, and we get our Wizard subclass, our Arcane Tradition. And we're gonna go with, is it Chronergy or Divination? Chronergy? No, Divination. Divination. Both are really good and viable choices here, I think. And if I were skipping Monk on this character and planning on taking this character into late game, I think I probably would go Chronergy because I think it has slightly better features at later levels. But Wizard 2 is as far as I'm going to go with this character, and as such, I think Divination's the better choice. Have I really never done a Divination Wizard before? I don't think I have. That seems preposterous. Well, okay, let's read what Wizards of the Coast writes about the Divination Wizard. The counsel of a diviner is sought by royalty and commoners alike, for all seek a clearer understanding of the past, present, and future. As a diviner, you strive to part the veils of space, time, and consciousness so that you can see clearly. You work to master spells of discernment, remote viewing, supernatural knowledge, and foresight. 100% on point for what we're going for. Now you are truly like Master Oogway. Maybe we should have gone Tortle, right? A monk who's like very wise and sagacious and a bit of a fate weaver and super new agey. Today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. Anyway, as a Divination Wizard, we get the Portent ability, and Portent is amazing. Glimpses of the future begin to press in on your awareness. When you finish a long rest, you roll 2 d20s and you record those numbers. Then, during the day, you can replace any ability check, attack roll, or saving throw made by you or a creature you can see with one of those numbers. Now, you do have to do so before the roll, but this can be potentially fantastic for those times when you really need an enemy to fail or an ally to succeed at something. Of course, you might roll like a 10 and an 11 or something. And that's not necessarily going to be super great in letting you know if applying it will actually lead to a success or a failure. But as long as it's just like a middling roll or lower, and you can be applying Bane and unsettling words to your enemy's saving throw when they're saving against stunning strike, there's a pretty high likelihood that even a big bad is going to fail that save. You have a DC of 16 at this level, and so yeah, that's what I would primarily, I think, hope to use Portent for. Of course, if both rolls are relatively high, well, hey, now you've got a couple of guaranteed hits for your allies. And that's not such a bad thing either. By contrast, the Chronergy wizard would have gotten access to Chronal Shift, which is basically like the Silvery Barb spell, but maybe a little worse, forcing a reroll that could actually lead to an even higher roll, as opposed to forcing the creature to just take the lower roll when you use Silvery Barbs, right? And similarly, using your reaction. Now, unlike Portent, with Chronal Shift, you do get to wait and see if the roll succeeds or fails first. But in my mind, it's almost like we already potentially have a spell to do something similar, but arguably a little better. So I would prefer to just dictate what the roll is going to be on those occasions when I just really need something to succeed or fail. Now, both Portent and Chronal Shift can be used twice per day, but Portent also has the added benefit of not using up your reaction. Anyway, I really do think both are good options here, but I prefer Divination for this build personally. At level 11, with our Portent secured, I think we need to go back to Bard for a bit. I want to at least get to Bard 5 for a couple of really good reasons. First off, as a Bard 4 here, we would get an ability score increase or feat. Again, for this version of the character, I'm going to bump Wisdom here, I think, to cap it at 20, better ensuring that both our unarmed strikes and our stuns land, plus our armor class, of course. Again, if I had skipped monk levels altogether, I'd probably either max Charisma, or if I took Lucky last time, I might go Resilient Constitution, or maybe Bountiful Luck, I think, which would let you extend your halfling luck of re-rolling ones to an ally, which is really nice and a great potential support feature, I think. At level 12, we would be a Bard 5. And first up, our Bardic Inspiration goes from a D6 to a D8, which isn't a huge bump. You know, it's just one more or one worse, I guess, for our enemies, as the case may be. But I mean, hey, how many times have you just made or missed a saving throw by one, right? More importantly for us, I think at Bard 5, we get Font of Inspiration, which tells us that our Bardic Inspirations now reset on a short rest. And that feels really, really nice, considering that both our key points and now our inspirations are available to us much more often so that we can be stunning, especially with much greater regularity. We also do, as a Bard 5, get 3rd level Bard spells. There are some really fantastic utility and support levels at 3rd level spells for us, including Tiny Hut, Catnap, and even some great concentration-based spells like Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, and even Bestow Curse, which could potentially give an enemy disadvantage on ability checks and saving throws made with an ability score of your choice if you touch them and they fail a wisdom save. That said, giving an enemy with a high constitution score disadvantage on saves is probably going to be less potent than lowering their actual roll most of the time, right, via Bane. Plus, Bane applies to attacks, plus it can hit multiple enemies, so I still think it's the better use of our concentration, personally, if we're just looking at debuffing somebody. Plus, again, you know, we do have Silvery Barbs for that kind of disadvantage effect if we need it, and I really don't want to get close enough to a big bad to touch them. It's worth considering, though, as are all of these other spells, but again, I'm just going to say pick your favorites. But then at level 13, Eloquence Bard 6 does give us some really cool and neat features, including the ability for an ally to keep your Bardic Inspiration if they use it and then still fail anyway, as well as an ability to communicate magically with any creature, even if you don't share a common language. If that sounds awesome for you, go for it. For me personally, I'm assuming that we're using most of our inspirations to adversely affect the enemy, and I really want more key points more than anything right now, I think, so that I can stun more often. So I'm going to go back to Monk for the rest of the way on this character. So yes, at 13 we would be a Monk 6, and we get key empowered strikes. Our unarmed strikes are now considered magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance, but ours were already force damage, so not a huge deal unless the enemy is resistant to or immune to force damage, I suppose. And then as an astral monk, we do get Visage of the Astral Self. So if you really want to spend yet another key point, when you summon your wise guy arms, why is that so funny to me? It's not that funny. You can now summon a wise guy head. Doing so lets you see in both magical and non-magical darkness, which could be cool if you have someone in your party using the darkness spell, I suppose. You have advantage on insight and intimidation checks, which is potentially useful. And then when you speak, you can make only one person within 60 feet of you hear you, or everyone within 600 feet of you can hear you. So I mean, this is mostly going to be flavor and utility stuff outside of like magical darkness, I think, but definitely really cool on the rare occasion when you might need one of these features, which is, let's admit it, kind of the monk's calling card, right? Really cool on the rare occasion when you need it. We're mostly here for the key point, and I would probably be preserving my key points for Stunning Strike. We do get an additional bump to our move speed bonus. We now have 15 feet of extra move speed, giving us 40 feet of move speed total, and that's really nice. All right, so again, at level 13, in lieu of a damage report, a little tactics report here. So we now have 6 key points, 1 to bring out our astral arms, and then 5 to try and stun a target. We have 3 uses of unsettling words to reduce the enemy's chance to resist that stun, and both of those things reset on a short rest. Don't forget that our enemies are also reducing their saves and attacks by 1d4, assuming our Bane has stuck. And again, since it's charisma save, and potentially with the help of our other resources, it should stick on most enemies most of the time. We have a lot of spell slots to use for Silvery Barbs, among other things, to twist fate on the off chance that our enemies are succeeding at attacks and saving throws. Not to mention the advantage that we will be giving our allies when we use Silvery Barbs and or inspiration if we're not using it on our enemies, and maybe even advantage via our familiar. Finally, we get 2 uses of Portent each day for those times when our enemy really needs to fail a save or an attack, or an ally really needs to succeed on one, right? The stars are just shifting all over the place with this character. In my head, it's like blurred images of friend and foe alike are just strafing around the battlefield as we decide what's going to succeed and what's going to fail. And it just feels like we're this amazing force of cosmic power. I love it. All right, at level 14, we would be a monk 7. We get evasion, which is a nice feature that lets us take no damage if we succeed on a dexterity save against something that would otherwise have us take half damage on a successful save, and half damage if we fail that saving throw. That's really fantastic when we need it. You know, fireballs are going to be much less scary than they used to be, among other things. And we also get stillness of mind as a monk 7, and this is either a pretty decent feature or a fairly weak one, depending on how things are ruled at your table, I think. It lets us use our action to end a charmed or frightened effect on ourselves, and that'll be really nice when we can use it, but many people would consider it unusable if our character is under the effect of something that doesn't let us choose what to do with our action, right? Like a dominate person, for example. I've also seen a lot of people just say, no, like this feature would overrule that. And so you could decide to use your action here, even if you were under the effect of, dominate person or something. I've seen it both ways. Obviously, one interpretation makes this ability a lot stronger than the other. I hope for your sake, you get the more powerful interpretation. Also, at level 7 monk, we get another key point. At level 15, we would be a monk 8, and we get another ability score increase or feat. I mean, of course we need resilient constitution, and I would love to have more charisma for the sake of our bard spells and another use of our bardic inspiration. But I mean, I can't really create a re-roller character and not take the lucky feat, can I? I don't think I can. So sure, let's say we're taking lucky here. And with lucky, for those who don't know, we get 3 luck points per day that we can use to roll a second d20 after we have made an ability check, an attack roll, or a saving throw, but before we know the outcome. And then we choose which roll we use. Or we could also spend a luck point to roll a d20 when an attack is made against us and choose which roll the attack uses. It's fun, it's powerful, it's perfect for our lucky little fortune teller. At level 16, we would be a monk 9, and we get another unarmored movement improvement. We can now move along vertical surfaces and liquids on our turn without falling. Another super cool and very flavorful ability that will be awesome once in a great while. We also get another key point. And then finally for us at level 17, we would be a monk 10, and we get another bump to our move speed. So it's 20 feet of bonus move speed for 45 total now. Really nice. And we get purity of body, which gives us immunity to disease and poison. Again, that can be really handy at times depending on what enemies you're fighting, right? And so for our final tactics report check-in here, let's just total up all the ways we have of twisting fate to hamper our foes and bolster our allies. For the foes, we can reduce their saves by both a 1d4 from Bane and a 1d8 now from Unsettling Words, and their attacks by Bane's 1d4. We can force them to roll a second d20 on a save or an attack and use the lower roll via Silvery Barbs. We can do the same when they make an attack against us via Lucky, and ultimately we can just straight up decide what their roll is going to be via Portent. For ourselves and our allies, we can give advantage to attacks via our familiar and also the Silvery Barb spell. We can add a 1d8 to our allies' attacks and saves via our Bardic Inspiration. We can re-roll our own attacks with our Lucky Feat. We can re-roll any ones that we roll on our own attacks and saves and checks thanks to Halfling Luck. And finally, again, we can just straight up decide what our roll or an ally's roll might be via Portent when we really need to. We bend fate to our whims. We laugh at the dice and our DM when they cry in frustration as we foil all of their best laid plans. All right, final thoughts. Here's, I guess, maybe a little insight into how I play D&D and the types of characters that I enjoy playing. I don't think that I would personally particularly enjoy playing a character who really just kind of sits back and buffs their allies and debuffs their enemies. Now, maybe that makes me a bad support character, and I'm perfectly willing to believe and fully in support of somebody who really enjoys that playstyle, and that's great. For me, I am very interested in buffing my allies and debuffing my enemies if it also means that I get to do something really cool and powerful once in a while in addition to that. And that, I think, was my main motivator for trying to work in Stunning Strike here, so that you can not just help your allies succeed more often and your enemies fail more often, but also bring something really potent and powerful to the table that's just gonna lock an enemy down and be almost like, oh, that is so important and powerful and amazing for us and our party, and it's going to make us be able to take this big bad down so much easier when we otherwise wouldn't have been able to, right? And I have a feeling that a lot of people out there feel a little bit similarly, that they might be a little more willing to play a support type character if it meant that they could do big burst damage once in a while, or have this amazing and powerful control ability in addition to the buffing and the healing and all that kind of stuff that they get to do. And so I hope that this character resonates with a lot of you that feel similarly to the way that I feel about playing support. Not that it's invaluable or even boring necessarily, but that it's that much better if we can bring something cool and fun and powerful to the table in addition to the other support stuff that we do, right? I think this character would be an absolute blast to play. I really do. But I also, like many of you, I'm sure, have a little nagging voice in the back of my head that's telling me maybe we reached too far. Did we overdo it? No. I would never try to stretch a character past its breaking point. Okay, we might have overdone it, maybe. The reality is, this character might be better off just picking two of the classes that I went with, I think, and sticking to them. I think if I were playing this character in game, there's a high likelihood that I would probably either try to really optimize for Stunning Strike, making it as potent as possible by probably starting Monk 5 and then going Eloquence Bard all the way to 5 and then Monk the rest of the way, I think. Or just really try to optimize for that re-roller aspect by starting Bard to 5, maybe 6, and then just Chronergy Wizard the rest of the way probably, as I really like the later features that the Chroner just gets for like fate twisting and controlling and things. Going either of those those two alternative routes would let us be much less multiple ability score dependent, meaning that we'd have a much better constitution score, among other things, and thus concentration check, not to mention hit point pool, of course, and even hopefully get to feats that I really wanted, but I couldn't get to, like Bountiful Luck or like the Second Chance feat, both of which are really cool, I think. So yeah, part of me feels like maybe this build that I ended up with was like 2 characters crammed into one. But you guys know me. I've never been one to play it cautiously or one to be particularly afraid of being like a glass cannon or stretched too thin, right? My MO has pretty much always been, and probably always will be, to like overreach in the name of stretching something as far as I can and then letting you decide where to be prudent. So in a way, this isn't that much different than most of my builds. And in the end, all of that said, I don't think you couldn't make this work as I've laid out. I mean, keep in mind that all of these re-rolling, fate-twisting features that we have to benefit our allies and harm our enemies can and will benefit us as well, right? If the meanest enemy on the field is stun-locked, you're generally going to be okay, despite being as squishy as you are. There's no reason why we have to end our turn in melee range of an enemy. Not that they sometimes couldn't get to us anyway, right? But we do have luck points. We have our halfling luck. We have silvery barbs and bane and portent to both reduce an enemy's effectiveness against us, as well as help us succeed on attacks and saves ourselves that we might otherwise have failed. Not to mention things like the shield spell and absorb elements too that we picked up along the way. And I really like playing high risk, high reward characters. So I'm gonna say bring it on. Playing a character built this way might be tempting fate, but as I've kind of been saying this whole time, we're not afraid of fate. We are fate's master. And so that's the build for the week. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I know I had a lot of fun creating it. So more importantly, I hope you know that I love you and I'm very grateful for all of your support. So thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking out the other content on the channel and liking and subscribing and clicking the notifications bell and all of those other things that I'm supposed to tell you to do. I hope you have a great week. I hope I see you again very soon. And until then, take care. Bye. This here's a tale for all the fellas. Try to do what those ladies tell us. Get shot down cause you're overzealous. Play hard to get females get jealous. Dungeons and Dragons. La 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 la. From frustration, first inclination is to become a monk and leave the situation, but every dark tunnel has a ladder of hope, so don't hang yourself with a celibate rope. Sorry, my 80s are showing. Well, no, don't say that. Don't say that because it's going to be already blah, blah, blah. Well, don't even say that. Don't say that. Again, like I've said, I don't know if I've actually said that yet, so never mind. What was it called? I can't remember. Blah, 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 blah. Beep, 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 or... I forgot it again. Second chance. Second chance. It's called Second Chance. Don't forget.